You're listening to The Girl Dad Show.
Welcome to Season 3 of The Girl Dad Show, where we explore the intersection of parenthood and entrepreneurial spirit. Join me and some incredible guests as we share tips and tricks for finding work-life balance and making a positive impact not only on the world, but also our families. Let's create a fulfilling life together. It's The Girl Dad Show, Season 3. John, welcome to the show. Thank you for hopping on The Girl Dad Show today.
Dude, I'm pumped to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm really excited about sharing your story and what little I know about you to the listeners, and then unpacking even more of it, because I know we got a chance to talk a little bit, and I just was like so fascinated with your story. And so we met so quickly and then turned it into a get to know you on the show.
Yeah, totally. I'm pumped to jump in, man.
Well, let's do it. Let's start with telling the listeners what you do for a living.
Yeah, so my name's John Alarcon. I'm co-founder at a company called Worklyfe. So we recently launched middle of last year, and are just in that process of growing the business. So early stage startup, funded, and looking to drive a lot of activity and growth this year.
Nice. That's awesome. And what made you start this business? Walk me through your professional journey to this point.
Yeah, so my professional journey has taken a lot of twists and turns. There's been some themes throughout it, I think, but it's definitely, you have to kind of explain it.
Yeah.
So my first job was at a golf course in high school.
Nice.
Yeah, my high school girlfriend's dad got me a job, and I was like so pumped to actually get a paycheck and stuff like that. And so I think probably everyone has a story like that of their first job. But yeah, my first probably real job, outside of college was actually at a company called College Works, where I was actually a college student, running a painting business, which was a little bit unique. I was down here in San Diego at UC San Diego. Had a pretty good baseball career, and about the middle of college, I realized, like, gosh, I'm not going to be a professional baseball player. There's a lot bigger, more talented people than me, so maybe I should think about what I should do with my life. So I stopped playing baseball. Kind of thought about what should I actually do with a career, and thought about like where can I build skills and stuff, and kind of how they marketed themselves was a business internship, and so got into that. It's a really interesting business model. In theory, it probably shouldn't work, but it does. Where they bring in a batch of new students each year. They're people that are studying to be doctors or lawyers or pharmacists or business majors, and like they literally say, we're going to help you run a painting business, drop you on a corner, go. And you kind of build a painting business as your job for the summer. So you learn like sales, you learn marketing, you learn like knocking on doors, like how to sign a contract, like literally everything.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the way that you get paid is in profit. So just like a business owner, you could sell 100 grand in paint jobs in a summer and make no money, or you could make like 40 grand as a college kid, which is awesome. So, so that was like my first like real job in a sense, besides working, at a golf course and as a busboy at a restaurant. So.
Wait a minute. So this is a really cool program, actually. So what kind of support do they give you? They don't literally just drop you off, or do they?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
In like the middle, like the financial district, these kids will really suffer trying to sell paint jobs to corporate America.
Yeah, no, that's a way oversimplification. The business has been around for like 30 plus years, I think now.
Yeah.
And in aggregate, it's one of the largest like residential painting companies in America. Just a bunch of college kids running around, signing contracts and hiring painters and, managing job sites. So it's really interesting. I think one of the big things I learned there was scalability. Their processes are very tight, because if you think about it, that model potentially introduces a lot of risk for a business, because you have, people that maybe haven't run a business before, maybe don't even understand some of those core concepts, maybe haven't hired or trained people before, haven't managed before.
Right.
And so there's a ton of actually really good support and training through that. And like I was saying, one of the valuable things that I learned from that was not just, how to build resiliency and grit and, kind of work through some of the challenges of running a business, but also seeing like, okay, at scale, how do you kind of like put guardrails on things and, like for lack of a better term, make it dummy proof, where it's like, hey, here's like a script that you can say to like a client the first time you meet with them. And here's like some core principles on how to sell. And, here's how to interview well. And there was like for every step in the business, there was support and kind of process, which is what makes it work. Because like I said, in hindsight, in theory, it shouldn't work. But it's a, millions and millions of dollars company. So.
Yeah, but it's crazy that they basically run this program for college kids. Is it a college program that's it just happens to be a business, or is there someone that's running this business that makes profit as well, in addition to the profit that the college kids are making going through the boot camp?
Yeah, so it's not through colleges, but the target kind of person to be in it is a college student. And so there are owners that they've been doing it for, my gosh, I don't even know how many years now. I think they were at like 15 years when I did it, and so they're probably at 30 now. There's owners, partners, and then, they kind of license out divisions to people that have gone through this over the years and that want to like essentially buy a territory and like scale from there. So, which actually is partially kind of after doing this for a year, I got asked to come back and, kind of train other people to do this.
Yeah. Sounds like you were successful if they asked you to come back.
Well,
How much did you make your first summer?
yeah, I think I made like $12,000 that summer.
Wow, that's really good.
At the time, yeah, like, being a college student, and kind of the trade-off was like, well, I can go back to working as a busboy again, or I can like maybe build some skills. Like, I definitely saw it as super valuable.
It's amazing because if you're only getting paid on profit, that's actually a lot of money for a college student that doesn't have experience running a business. You know what I mean? That's really significant.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. No, it was fun. I think what was valuable to me was like just meeting really high caliber driven people. Some people that I like still talk to today, and previous company before this that I was at. I actually mentored the CEO when he was in college at Berkeley. I was his district manager.
No way.
And so just kind of funny how full circle, what was it, 6 or 7 years later, he's like, dude, we got to work together at the startup that he started. And I was there for 6.5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was kind of, a lot of different facets of it were really beneficial for me. And it kind of, I feel like, set me on a good trajectory getting into the business world. So
it's awesome. And then what'd you do after that? So after college, where'd you go?
Dropped out of college actually for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So basically, I came back as a district manager at College Works, and part of that process is like you learn recruiting, you work with students to kind of like bring them into the program, and then you kind of like train them and mentor them and coach them through the business. And so I did that for a couple of years. And at the time, there was a Northern California division and a Southern California division. And the SoCal president, was actually in the process of buying out the NorCal president. And so, essentially he needed boots on the ground to help grow that division up in Northern California. And so at this point, I was kind of at the point in college where I was like, oh my gosh, I just need a pass. I just like C's get degrees type of mentality. Whereas like, I'm not the best student. My sister is, which we can talk about that in a minute, but, yeah, so there's a point where, he kind of offered a few people to go up and actually relocate to Northern California to help grow their business up there. And so, I really had kind of like, gosh, I was maybe 21 at the time, this mentality that like, hey, entrepreneurship's maybe a different and better path than what I was introduced to when I was growing up. And, I really wanted to kind of like blaze my own trail. So I said, I'm going to do it. And so relocated up to Northern California, lived in Davis for about a year, and was still actually enrolled in classes at UCSD. Wow. So I would live up there, stay up in Northern California, fly in for midterms, fly out that night after midterms and keep kind of helping grow the business. So it was a wild couple of quarters, but eventually after doing that for, 6 months, I was like, all right, I'm just going to focus on this full time and forget school. So, in hindsight, I'm glad it worked out. Like, it could have gone a lot different. But eventually I went back and finished school, because my parents probably would have skinned me alive if I graduate. I was like 5 classes short. So, yeah. So finished up a stint there and finished up graduating at UCSD and moved on.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. And then what did you hop around? How did you get into this job? Because this is a very specific niche, right? This is in HR. It's a HR tech company you started. And have you always been in HR? So like, did you make that jump from this to tech because of your connections, or what was that stage looking like?
Yeah, it was no, it was a little bit roundabout way of getting there. So after I graduated, I started working at a solar company actually.
Nice.
And they're eventually rebranded to Gen 110. We were called Solmentum when we started. And one of the guys that started the company was an alumni of College Works Painting. And so he was from the East Coast, a guy named Jason Brown. And he actually runs a fintech company called Tally now, which is doing really well. And
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah,
familiar
Tally's
with
great. Yeah. They're doing really good. Yeah.
awesome. So he had started this, solar company at the time. I think this is like 2012, like 2011 or something like that, where a big challenge in the solar industry was just like adoption.
Yeah.
And customer acquisition is like really expensive to acquire customers. And so the original kind of thesis of the business is like, well, what if we were like the sales arm specifically for like solar? And so we had kind of like pioneered selling the residential power purchase agreement. So his kind of like approach was like, well, recruit, College Works, painting alumni that have already done this model of start a business in a new territory, hire, knock on doors, do what it takes to like, sell into the residential construction kind of industry. And so, it got some attention. Like Kleiner Perkins actually funded it. And so it's like kind of my first introduction to like a VC, backed startup. At one point we were kind of competing head to head with Solar City, Elon Musk's company, and eventually he dropped in like 50 mil of his own money for marketing. And so they started to blow us out of the water. But, it was fun. And, again, it was, really great learning on, I think one of the things that I learned, very strongly from that experience is like, gosh, I don't want to be in, kind of the residential or B2C kind of world necessarily. Cause, it was like my second real business that I was in, but I learned a lot about like, margin and, willingness to spend and, overcoming objections with a new, kind of technology or a new like financial product. And so again, a lot of really good learning. But it was, I spent a couple years there and then realized, okay, it's time to move on. Part of that too is that I met a girl, who's now my wife. So
Nice. So that also helped the transition.
Yeah. At the time, I was living in Anaheim, or like Fullerton area, and my now wife had just finished school up in Sonoma and had moved back to LA, and so she was like an hour drive away. And so eventually, I was like, gosh, I gotta spend more time with her, more than just like once a week on Saturdays. So I was like, how can I move closer and spend more time with her? And ended up just finding a nonprofit consulting gig that was like really close to her, like where she was staying. And so, that kind of afforded me to be able to move and be closer. And it was like a completely random career turn. But
Yeah, very random. That's awesome. That's great though.
Yeah.
That's really funny that you did that for love. That's awesome, man. I hope your wife appreciates the gesture. That sounds really romantic and risky. I like it.
It was funny. It's like a West Side Story. My rent was like $500 a month.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
Yeah, well, because I was living in Hawthorne, which is like right next to Compton and Inglewood.
Oh yeah,
And
okay,
so
got it.
I was living there, and she was living in El Segundo in her parents' house. And so it was like really funny setup.
Super funny setup. That's awesome. Man, you must have this is actually a deeper story. You're kind of laughing it off, but this was actually a really critical business decision. You kind of knew what you wanted. You knew what you were doing. It sounds like you weighed out a lot of options and you sacrificed a lot for this.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say I knew what I was doing, but I knew like what I wanted, I think. And so, for me, it was like in hindsight, it almost seemed like a really impulsive decision, but it might have just been like rooted in some of the things that I value, and I kind of hold precious. And so, yeah, like I said, in hindsight, I'm glad it worked out, but maybe there's a reason it worked out is because it aligns with what like I value. So
it's awesome, man. That's great. And then when did you start having kids? And tell me about your kids. How many do you have?
Yeah, so we have 3 kids. Kaden is 6, Levi's 4, and Chloe just turned 2 a couple weeks ago.
6, 4, and 2. Got it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we got verbal approval for one more, so we'll.
All right, there you go.
Yeah,
It's fantastic.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're awesome. They're at SeaWorld right now, actually, doing a field trip. So
Oh, I'm like, oh no, am I holding you away from SeaWorld with the kids? I'm so sorry.
no.
But it sounds like it's with school. That's great.
Yeah, it's a school field trip. So
That's awesome. So you're in the methodology of doing them all together? Because I've heard that some parents like to spread them apart, and some parents like to do it together, and you look
yeah,
like you're in the camp of doing it all together.
dude, if I had my vote in it, we would have had like twins and then triplets and then been done. But I think I probably would have taken like 5 years off of work to.
I love that mentality. I second that mentality.
Yeah.
If I had an option, if I could control that, I would have loved buy one get one free. Just like
Yeah.
twin, 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 and that would have been like cool. 6 kids, amazing, boom. But unfortunately, couldn't orchestrate that. But
Yeah.
that's awesome, man. And so I have to ask, just because it's kind of a personal question, but it's really important for me to understand.
Mhm.
With such young kids, why are you starting a business? Doesn't that seem very risky?
Yeah, it could be perceived as risky. I think that, one of the things that I really value, I think first off, like the world of work is just different. Like you can kind of create any type of working environment that you want. You just have to find the right place to do it. And so, for me, I've actually worked remote like the last 7 years of my life. Actually, maybe even 8 years. Um, and so for me, I've actually learned how to kind of, and it's been a trial and error thing, but manage my energy levels, manage time. And like for me, I really love being able to like step out the door and see my kids right there. And, in the times when I have been in an office, there was like a year period where I was going to the office during that time when we had kids. It was actually a lot harder to like be be efficient and be effective, in a business. It was always like kind of the struggle where it's like, well, work actually doesn't always happen between 9 and 5, and then you turn it off, and then like dad happens from like 5 p.m. to 6 the next morning, depending on what time they wake up. And I think the nature of like starting a business and the nature of running a business is there's I find that sometimes it happens in bursts, like the kind of creative, like aha moments, the deep work. It's really hard to kind of actually separate that for me. It's really hard to like manufacture that and make it happen like in an office or only in certain areas. And so for me, as long as our bases are covered, as long as I have kind of channels and ways to, do that deep work and creative work, I actually, for me at least, I don't see it as risky. There's obviously the risk of, like, well, what if it doesn't work out? But, for me personally, I feel confident that, okay, I have at least an applicable skill set that I can go find another job if needed. And the reality is, like, my wife's incredible. Like, it obviously doesn't work if, we're not kind of in partnership and working on this stuff together. And so it does allow me to actually take some risks, to be able to, like, give it another shot at a startup and try to try to grow it. So.
It's awesome, man. I love it. I love that. I love that response because you're basically alluding to the fact that it can be perceived that way, but for you, it's more of a perspective and a mindset. It's like it's no more riskier than anything else, and it's just about like how you look at it.
Yeah, and part of that is like maybe just the rebellious part of me because growing up, my dad played it really safe, and it makes sense for his situation. My dad still to this day like sends me job links to like government jobs and like
Oh, got it.
yeah, just like kind of context on his upbringing. His family's from Mexico, immigrated, in the 60s. My mom's side of the family is from Pennsylvania and came out to San Diego in like the mid 1900s. But yeah, my dad grew up like not very well off. He grew up family of six in like a house that's probably smaller than most people's living rooms. And so grew up in Northern California, kind of Fresno area, and then they relocated to El Centro down here in SoCal, which is like 2 hours east of San Diego. And for him, stability was really important, right? So he grew up like 5, 6 years old, helping his dad pick watermelon and cantaloupe in the fields, and like
Wow.
that was his life. Like summers were filled with work and like helping in the packing sheds, and then like riding his bike around town. And there was like simple joys and stuff, but he didn't have a lot. And so as he, kind of met my mom, they got married at 19, had my brother at 20. Like his whole life has been centered around like, how do I provide for my family? How do I provide stability when he hasn't had a lot growing up? And so I think that drove a lot of his decisions career wise, and he's been really successful in what he's done. He started in construction early on, then started a AC repair business in El Centro, which is like a desert, which, hey, there's a strong need there, right? Repairing AC.
Captured market. I like it. Very smart,
Exactly.
man. Yeah.
And so when they moved out to San Diego, where they're at now, he had gotten a job as a building inspector at UC San Diego. So he was like in charge of all their projects and making sure that things are up to code and all that stuff. He was like the bane of the contractor's existence, because he would find the corners that they would try to cut that made that made
Yeah.
it dangerous, and find it and make sure that things were
But that constitutes as a government job, though, because that's UC San
totally,
Diego now, right? Yeah.
exactly,
So now he
right?
saw the benefits of that stability.
Totally. Yeah, and so growing up, it provided like a pretty amazing childhood for us.
Hmm.
We were like, lower middle class. It's not like, we were had a yacht and stuff like that, but like we had what we needed. Like, anytime I needed a new glove for baseball, that's what he would spend his money on. It was always about investing in us as kids, and making sure that we're provided for, and having what we need. And so going back to kind of what I was saying earlier about like this rebelliousness, I actually grew up with a very kind of stable upbringing, and not having to worry about like financially, having to worry about things. And so,
Yeah.
and it's because he made those sacrifices to kind of create that for us. And so, what he might perceive as risky is, starting a business with 3 kids and, a mortgage and stuff like that. But I look at it as like, hey, actually, um, they're actually his kind of path isn't riskless. It's like, well, what if your pension gets wiped out someday?
Yeah.
Like, then what do you do, right? And so, so yeah, I think it's just different ways of looking at it. But for me, like, I kind of love the high risk, high reward, exciting kind of building, creating side
Yeah,
of
and it's almost like paying homage to the work that he did to create that environment for you to have less risk than him. And
yeah,
so that gives you the ability to take more risks because you grew up in an environment where you weren't like he basically raised your rock bottom
yeah,
essentially, through his work and effort. And so,
yeah.
it's almost like a nod to his effort. Is so that's a really interesting way of looking at it. I love that.
Totally. Thanks, man. Yeah, and I think, part of me that feels like this sense of not like duty, but like my parents gave so much for us that I have a responsibility to do as much as I can with it. And I mean, gosh, one of my big goals someday is to, make enough to level their house and rebuild it the way that they want it, and kind of give them the things that they like gave up for us. And so that's, I think, also part of what drives me to being in the startup world, and wanting to make something significant of that, because like I just want to kind of give it back to them, and do some really cool stuff with my family and closest friends. So
This episode of the Girl Dad Show is brought to you by Owners Club. As a business owner myself, I know firsthand how challenging the journey can be. Whether it's having someone that I can ask a very tactical question to, or just being able to share my big successes without guilt. Building a business is a lonely journey, and it does not have to be. After building and coaching dozens of businesses to success, there is one insight that is so obvious and simple, yet hard to execute. And that is network equals net worth. And so if you're a growth-minded, supportive, smart, and hardworking business owner looking for a community of like-minded entrepreneurs to build with, look no further than the Owners Club. You will make lifelong friends and build your business that works for you. You can learn more online at owners.club. It's amazing, man. That's a lot of love for your parents. That's awesome, man. So it sounds like you've always had a really good relationship with them, and understanding of like what they were trying to do and trying to build for you. And you have siblings?
yeah, 3 siblings. So older brother, he's 42, older sister, and then younger brother. So
Nice.
uh,
Okay, got it.
angsty middle child.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. And what do your siblings think about you starting a business with young kids?
Yeah, I mean, they don't, I guess they don't really think much of it. I think they, at least in terms of, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, we're all really different, I think. My oldest brother actually has Down syndrome, so he's, lived at home his whole life. And my older sister is the genius of the family. She went to I mentioned I wasn't a good student. She's the opposite. She went to Stanford, aced it. Went to UC Davis for vet school, aced it, did her residency
Wow.
there.
Yeah.
Got her second PhD at UCSD. Like some of the work she's doing was like reprogramming cells to like take out their nucleus, reprogram and go find cancer in the body and like go kill cancer. It's like crazy stuff that she's doing. It's
Oh
so
my
cool.
gosh.
Um,
Oh my
but
gosh.
this is
Wow.
now.
Yeah.
And then there's me, and then my little brother is just doing awesome things. He's a musician, and
Oh, cool.
he's also a
An
special ed
artist.
PE teacher. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Oh,
So,
he's a special ed PE teacher.
mhm. Yeah,
That's awesome. So it's like that's also very very interesting. So you grew up in a very dynamic and very diverse and rich family structure as well. It sounds like your siblings are all kind of like very different. It's
yeah,
kind of funny when people say that. I'm like, yeah, everyone says that, but you're like, no, 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 we're really different.
yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah. It taught me a lot growing up too, because the dynamic is like, on paper, my brother Chris is the oldest, but in a lot of ways, he's the youngest.
Yep.
I remember, there was a very clear point when I was in like first grade, when I finally like realized that my brother was different, because I actually was like older than him in some ways at that point. And it taught me a lot about just like compassion for people's circumstances and how to support people, kind of meet them where they are. And he's like the most amazing person. He's worked in grocery stores the last 25 years, and he's like a local
Awesome.
celebrity. So just from like being in the line and bagging people's groceries, he like meets everyone, and anytime
Yeah.
we go somewhere, someone knows him, which is so cool. But it's definitely an interesting dynamic in our family. And I think one of the things my parents really kind of instilled in us is like work ethic, and how to kind of like understand what we want and then just go out and do it. There wasn't really, it wasn't so much like a lesson that they actively taught us, but it was more so just kind of how they did things.
Yeah.
And so I think that they definitely kind of passed that on to us in a lot of ways.
It's awesome, man. So let's switch gears here a little bit, but how are you thinking about parenting yourself? It sounds like you've taken, what the gift that your parents have given you through sacrifice and determination, and you're, being entrepreneurial, you're starting a business, and it sounds like you grew up with a lot of diversity and just a very unique environment. But what are you doing? What are you doing to instill, some of this to your kids, or are you thinking about that differently as well? Or are you being a little more risky with them, and what
Yeah.
do you want them to do, and all those things? Yeah, talk to me about your thought process on parenting.
Yeah. I don't have like a groundbreaking framework. It very much is like kind of piecing together things as we go. But
Yeah,
I think some
that makes me
fundamental.
feel really good, by the way, because I'm like, okay, I was like, if you had something awesome, I'd be like, oh my god, I feel like a failure. I appreciate you
No,
saying that. That's great.
no, we can talk about that for sure.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I think one of the things that I've come to learn, over the last 5 or 6 years is um, how important resiliency is as a core kind of like trait. And it's not I think some people like believe that it's like you're born with resiliency, but it's actually developed over time. And a lot of this comes from kind of the world of psychology and like how you build resiliency and how you like develop grit as an individual. And I think that it's something that has to be intentional. And so if I had to point out like maybe one thing that as a parent, like I intentionally spend time like teaching my kids and helping them develop, it's just how to like be resilient, and like what does that mean? And we don't use those terms at like 4 years old.
Yeah.
I'll maybe drop that once in a while, but it comes in the form of managing emotions and understanding emotions in the first place, and things like understanding why you're doing things, and I think when I think about what's going to help kind of serve them well over the course of their life, there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be like challenges that they come across, both because they're pursuing opportunity and both because maybe tragedy happens or, whatever it may be. And so, if I had to point to like one thing that, I kind of intentionally focus on, it's building resiliency.
Dropping game here. I love it, John. That's beautiful, man. I love that mentality. I've been practicing a lot of this stuff. Similarly, I also believe in resiliency. I call it perseverance, but it's basically the same kind of general direction that you're kind of going into. And I talk to the kids a lot about like, hey, like that's okay to fail, and you can cry, but like let's cry for 5 minutes and like fail, and then let's try again, and you could quit, but I definitely want you to try at least 20 times. Yeah. And then see if you don't get better. Because if you really want to do this, it's going to take practice. And there's some things you're going to be good at immediately and some things you're going to suck at. But if you want to do it, you could do anything. You just have to practice enough.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful because there's some things that I fail miserably at, but there are some things that I've been able to like get them to practice enough, and then they achieve it. And then they're like, you could like see their brain working. You could see their brain working and going, oh my gosh, okay, I just put the work in. That sucked. And then I overcame this challenge. And like, who knows what that's going to mean in 20 or 30 years. But in my little way, I actually value that so much more than ingenuity. And I love that you just said that, because like when they're great at something, it's fun. It's nice for me. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. You're really good at that. Like, that's great that you picked it up, and I want to high five them and hug them. But I really like it when they have to like try for something, and they like persevere and push through it. Because I think that that's really at the end of the day, like how you're going to be able to like create a human being that is contributing to the world, not only for themselves, but also for their, community members, if they know how to persevere for things that they want.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. That's amazing. Some of the things that you said that stood out there is that, one, it's okay to get frustrated and cry, but sometimes that's really hard for parents to like endure, right? Because when I see my kids cry, especially my daughter, I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I fix it? Like, please don't cry. You were like, that's right. But there's times when they do need to struggle and like feel certain things, just so they know what it feels like, And I think especially raising boys, it's sometimes like they're as they grow up, they're gonna have friends that say like, oh, like don't cry, like they're gonna say things, but it's like, hey, actually, no, it's okay to cry. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to experience anger and all these things. It's how you react to and what you do about it that matters. So I think that's like a really important call out that you had, giving kind of your kids permission to feel those things.
Hey, thanks for saying that. I think for me, it's just about time boxing pain, right? Because this is like a trick that I've learned as an entrepreneur is like, okay, I know this could be a crazy dumb idea, but I'm going to do it, but I'm not going to do it like foolishly. I mean, it's already foolish starting a business, but just say, I'm sorry to say that to you right now as you're embarking on your new venture, but like I'm going to basically time box it. So if it's going to be painful, it's going to suck. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not able, I'm not like capable. I'm not experienced. I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to go do it. I'm going to put myself through this painful experience emotionally, mentally, and physically for 6 weeks. And then I basically time box it. So then I know that I'm like, if I can't make this work, this thing show some shade of success or opportunity or light at the end of the tunnel, I'm going to stop at 6 weeks. And that's how I get myself to like go through this resiliency exercise, right? Actually test things out and like I time box it. And so I've basically just taken that kind of practice and packaged it in for my kid because my kids, I should say, I'm not really that good with the second child. I'm much better with my oldest. my second, I'm like, here's my wallet. Let's go buy you a donut. Like, I'm like literally like the worst dad with my baby girl. It's like, I don't even know there's like something weird about having a young girl, but like it's just like kills me, But
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, hey, cry, but let's cry for like 3 minutes, and I'll literally set a timer on my watch.
Yeah.
And like, let's just cry. I'll cry with you. Let's cry together. And like, let's just cry it out. And let's just time box this, And then let's either try again, or we don't actually want to do this. Like, admit that you don't want to do this, or if you do want to do it, let's try again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's another thing that stands out. A big part of building resiliency is helping them find passions. There's a really awesome book by Angela Duckworth where she talks a lot about like building resiliency and grit. I think a lot of people have read it. And I think the part that people hone in on is like, oh, you need to endure and persevere to build grit. But one of the takeaways that I found as a parent is that actually before kids get into that stage of like, okay, endure and, work through challenges, it's actually important to help them understand what they do enjoy. And what actually builds resiliency over time is that foundational component of they're willing to endure and persevere because it's something that they find beneficial and that they enjoy, and it's a passion of theirs. And so as a parent, one of the things kind of intentionally, we're spending time on is like exposing them to things that might spark a passion or that they might enjoy. Because like our kids are so different. Like when our oldest was 2 years old, or like 1.5, he like picked up a toy baseball bat, and like, I was like, oh, is this it? Is he going to be a baseball player? And like, I put on like, the top 10 home runs of all time, YouTube, and he'd stand there and like, pretend to do it, and he'd like run around the living room and was like, yes, I got a baseball player. And then like a month later, he hated it. Like he just never picked it up. It was like heartbreaking for a moment. But in that moment, I could have said like, oh, we got to really like, he needs to learn to persevere. But, kind of knowing like, is that actually serving him well? Actually, what he really loves is like science. He says all the time he wants to be a scientist, especially since my sister's a scientist. He's kind of into wrestling now, but he's starting to kind of phase out of it. And part of that was because he saw a wrestling video and was like, that's so cool, right?
Yeah.
But, again, I think a big part of building resiliency is kind of exposing them to things so that you can help them kind of see what is it that they're passionate about? How do they function? Like, what do they enjoy? And then start to drive endurance and perseverance in that way.
I love that. So it sounds like a lot of it is like also containing that into helping them understand like the what and the why before you actually start training the resiliency. So it's not like resiliency for resiliency's sake. That's almost like, it's almost like a negative. In some ways it could be a negative thing, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. I love that. Yeah.
I think it plays into the business world too, because, when I've been like coaching teams in the past, it's very clear when someone's doing a role that they don't enjoy. And it's not because like they're soft or they're just not a hard worker. Sometimes they just like aren't like, they don't like that role, or it's very clear that like, hey, this path, like, maybe they're in sales and it's like, maybe you just don't like sales, and that's okay. Like, dial 100 more dials today and work harder. It's like, maybe that's just not right for you, and that's okay, and so I see a lot of parallels, like coaching teams in the past and working in the business world, where it's like, you can have resiliency in business, but if, to your point, if you're just kind of banging your head on the wall over and over and over, hoping you get a different result, like that's not actually a good form of resiliency. So
that's awesome, man. That's lovely. And then how much of your skills in business have you been using in parenting? I'm just curious.
yeah,
We have similar age kids, so I just want to know how much it actually works and applies, because you answer first and then I'll tell you why I'm asking, because
Okay.
it's kind of funny.
Yeah, I think I try to like incorporate things, like going back to exposing them to things, like introduce them to business concepts. So for example, my now 6-year-old, when he's 5, he was super into skateboards because he saw it on a cartoon. He's like, I want a skateboard. And I wasn't going to just get him a skateboard, because that means like in 3 months I'm going to have to pay a $3,000 ER bill because he broke his arm. So basically what I said is like, awesome, if you can get $50, you can buy a skateboard.
Nice.
And so the next like month, was spent figuring out how can you get $50. And, I would start to say like, hey, what are some ways that like, why would anyone even give you money? Like, think about that. Like, what is money? And it's like, oh, you can exchange for money. Like, you exchange value for money. And so it's a concept of, well, what can you exchange? Well, like, you can sell something, you can, exchange your time, like services. And so it kind of like helped to open his eyes. So it's like, oh, you don't just like get money,
Yeah.
because when
Yeah.
they're 3 years old and we go to the grocery store,
Yeah.
your
Oh, yeah.
interpretation of money is like dad puts his credit card in the machine and pays for something, right? And like
That's
that's
right.
not enough money. And so, so there's ways to like kind of incorporate it. And so after like a couple months, we kind of came to the conclusion that like, oh, hey, we can start a business. And so we started a car wash business, which basically meant I had a car wash business.
I already love this story so much. This is amazing.
But the way that we launched it was just kind of on a whim. It was the day before Halloween, and we're like, well, Caden, who's gonna wash, like, whose cars are you gonna wash? And he was like, well, we have neighbors. And so what we did was like we printed little business cards. And as we went trick or treating on Halloween that night, I kind of like picked and choose the neighbors that, we kind of knew and, I
Yeah.
thought they were safe and stuff. But, we made little business cards and, he went and trick or treated and would come back to me and then he'd like run back with a business card. It's sad to say we don't have a very good salesperson on our hands here, but you would give it to him and give him a quick pitch, like I'm washing cars, I want to buy a skateboard. If you need your car washed, like here's my card type of thing. It was
Yeah.
awesome. Like a week later, one of our neighbors called us and like we went over there and talked about like what do you need, Caden? Like how do you even wash a car? Like and so just helping him like think through like how do I actually
That's
one know what I
awesome.
want, why, how do you even go get that? Like why would people pay you in the first place? And it was awesome. Like I'll share pictures with you afterwards of just
Oh
like
my
holding his
gosh.
dollar and stuff. It's so cool. So
I'm all about this story, brother. This is so good. It's so good. Yeah, I'm so excited to hear the story. It makes me so happy to hear that there's other parents out there like that doing similar things. It's great. Um, awesome. Let me switch gears here. Time is flying when you have fun, but I do
Okay.
have a set of rapid fire questions that I like
Sure.
to ask every guest.
Okay.
Create some like symmetry to the chaos that I host here.
Sure.
All right, so let me start with the first one.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for other parents and soon-to-be parents?
Oh man, advice. I would say a kind of saying that stands out and has kind of rang true with parenting is that comparison is the thief of joy. And I think as you're becoming a parent or newly a parent, we're kind of always looking for like, well, what is good? Like, am I doing a good job? Like, we're looking for validation. We're looking for like, am I doing the right things? And even I think you kind of hinted at this earlier when you said like, I forget exactly what you said, but it's like, oh, am I doing this the right way, right? And I think sometimes people can compare, like it's good to compare and see what other people are doing, but it's not good to compare the outcomes of your kids as a way to like validate yourself. And what I mean by that is, you know, um, I found very early, like with our first, he's a really smart and like gifted kid. And like he picked up reading really quickly and stuff like that. And there's times when it's like really tempting to like share that about him and be like, oh my gosh, he's in TK and he's reading at a fifth grade level. Like it's this amazing, but that puts a lot of pressure on them to perform for validation. And it starts to create this kind of mentality around um, their performance being a reflection on you as a parent. And so, and I saw this in a lot of different ways too with my wife and how we were kind of like, the things that you buy or like, how you spend your time parenting and stuff. It's really tempting to kind of compare, but it does kind of like hinder you a little bit. So that'd be my advice is just be aware
I
of
love it.
like, yeah, just being aware of when you're comparing for validation versus like to help. So.
Man, that's great advice. That's really, really good advice. I love that. Okay, If you could go back and tell yourself one thing before having kids, what would you tell yourself?
Oh man, you're just you're never ready. Like I feel like there's just never a point of preparation where you're like fully prepared, for what being a parent entails.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean like you should go into it unprepared, but yeah, I think like going back, just savoring the moments, because like as cliche as it is, like they do pass so fast. And I one part of my like favorite parts of parenting is being reminded of how little they are. And it's just in little things, like you're folding your clothes and you're like, oh my gosh, this fits them, like this is like I can't believe my daughter, like this is how small she is. There's just those little moments when you remember how small they are, but like it goes by so fast. And so like savoring the moments and constantly like consciously making the decision to like pay attention to them, I think is so important. And it's so hard to do sometimes when there's like so much stuff going on.
Yeah. Very true. What is the most surprising thing that you've learned about yourself after becoming a parent?
It's it takes work. I think, in retrospect, my parents did so many things well, and I thought you just are a parent and like you just like your kids do what you say, and like they're helpful, and it was like surprising how hard the work is, but it definitely gets easier. And I think it does take a degree of intentionality and building structure in your family and building like traditions. So for example, like we try to eat dinner every night together, things like that, where like I just kind of did it growing up, but then didn't realize that like, oh gosh, like that means my mom had to like prepare beforehand, my dad had to prepare beforehand, like every single day, just to make sure that this event happens where we're all together at the same time eating the same food, and you know what I mean, and it's quality time. And so I think that was surprising as a parent, is I thought that it just would come more naturally, but it does take a degree of thought and like intentionality as you go about it. So
it's awesome. Yeah, that's really, really good. And switching gears, what's your all-time favorite business book?
Oh, I love this one. I'll go back and read it a few times a year. High Output Management by Andy Grove.
Oh,
yeah,
awesome.
I think it's a how-to basically on run a business, and I think he's like so thoughtful on. He looks at things from a very operational standpoint, but at the end of the day, like a business is kind of like a math formula. And so I love it. It's like there's so much like good content in there that you can read at different stages of a company. And I kind of treat it as like a handbook for running a business.
Oh my gosh, it sounds like music to my ears. I'm definitely going to check that out. Never heard of it. That's great.
Okay, cool.
I love it. That's like my favorite question, because I get to find all these new books to read. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last question to bring us home. So when you're not being a super entrepreneur building the next big tech company, or being a super dad to a plethora of toddlers, what does John do for fun? What's your downtime activities?
I'm starting to get back into working out.
Nice.
Being a college athlete, like, I kind of took for granted that, you burn calories quickly. And, now I actually, after college, I got into CrossFit and stuff and loved it, and loved doing like the competitions and stuff like that. And then I, went through a dad bod phase. And so now I'm like kind of getting back into working out and fitness and biking and stuff. So that's kind of like what I enjoy doing now. Obviously not as much as I probably should be doing, but
it's awesome though, man.
Yeah, it's kind of the path we're on.
I love it. That's awesome. Hey, John, thank you so much for taking time to be on my show today. I had a really, really great time getting to know you better, and I hope you had fun too.
Totally. Yeah, this is a blast, man. Thanks for having me on, and looking forward to catching up again soon.
Yeah, we'll be talking soon for sure. We'll talk soon, okay? Take care, brother.
Bye.
This episode of The Girl Dad Show is brought to you by you. We have been working very hard to bring you the best guests and content to the show, and have been steadily growing month over month. And we're finally ready to start talking to businesses that want to partner with us to promote on our show. So if you know anyone that would be interested in having me promote their business on The Girl Dad Show, please email us at young@thegirldadshow.com. Thank you for your support, and look forward to learning how to be a great parent together.